You're listening to PetLifeRadio.com.
You've had a long day at work, and you can't wait to just get home, take off your shoes, plop yourself down in your favorite chair, and relax. You walk up to your tranquil residential home and your neatly manicured lawn in your quiet suburban neighborhood, put the key in the lock, open the door, and... Yes, the pets have gone wild! What were you thinking? Welcome to the show about everything you always wanted to know about exotic pets, where to get them, what to feed them, and how to care for them. You'll even find out why some people live with a monkey. Now, here's your host, exotic pet expert and author Bob Tart. Hey, Bob, what were you thinking?
You're listening to What Were You Thinking, a show about exotic pets. I'm your host, Bob Tart, author of the books Enslaved by Ducks and Foul Weather, which you can read about on my website, bobtart.com. Now, this week we're welcoming Wade Harrell to What Were You Thinking? Did I pronounce your name right? Wade, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thanks for joining us. Now, Wade Harrell has been keeping invertebrates as pets for 34 years now, and he first started keeping tarantulas 15 years ago. Wade is the current president of the American Tarantula Society, and, okay, now get this, he keeps more than 100 tarantulas and other arthropods in his basement. So how do the other family members feel about those 100 arthropods in the basement?
Oh, well, they're used to it. I already had, actually, my wife's pretty happy that they're in the basement now.
And not crawling around the house. Did they escape ever?
No, but when she met me, I had a house full of things, and they were in literally every room in the house. I had some kind of weird critter going on there, and then, but since then we've moved to a different house with a nice big basement, so all the stuff is nicely contained, and if you were to visit us and didn't go in the basement, you would think we were almost normal people.
Almost, huh?
Almost.
I should mention right away that the American Tarantula Society has a website, and the address is atshq.org.
That's right.
Yeah. What kind of things are on the website?
Well, we have a number of different downloadable articles, some dealing with basic tarantula care, and a few other, typically topics that tarantula hobbyists typically need to learn about, and a lot of the basic questions that people might have about, if they've just gotten a pet tarantula or thinking about getting a pet tarantula that they could learn about.
One cool thing I saw on the website was an article called What to Do If You Find a Tarantula. Right. And I always thought of tarantulas as being creatures of the tropics, but it says on your website that you can find them, is that in Texas?
You can find them actually in the United States, most of the southern half of the United States, west of the Mississippi River. There are tarantulas all up, starting in Arkansas, Louisiana, and then going west through Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, the states bordering them, all the way up to northern California.
Wow, I had no idea. And the website said there's more than 50 species just in America?
Yeah, there's that many. It's thought at the moment. The taxonomy is a little confused at the present time, so there's a lot of disagreement among the scientists exactly how many there really are, but there's quite a few.
Well, I want to get into what kind of a pet tarantula makes, and that's understanding that there are all these different species, and that certainly different species have different pet potentials. But I first want to ask you, how did you originally get interested in arthropods?
Oh, well, probably my first arthropod I ever had as a pet. I was about 6 years old, and I found on a camping trip, I found a Hercules beetle, an eastern Hercules beetle. The beetle is about 3 inches long, and the males have these really big horns, and I just thought that was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. And I kept it in, like a shoebox for for a couple of weeks, and that was just the most fascinating thing to me. And ever since then, I've been interested in all kinds of things. I mean, I also like reptiles and things like that, but primarily it's been bugs. And I had praying mantises as pets.
Oh yeah,
things like that growing up, and then eventually, I didn't really get into tarantulas until like the early '90s. I got my first tarantula But since then, I've built a collection of quite a few of them.
Well, now tarantulas really have a bad rap as a poisonous and deadly, prone to bite. And I think wasn't there a James Bond movie where some villain tried to knock him off by putting a tarantula in his bed?
If it's the one I'm thinking, it's one of the earliest ones.
Yeah,
Like Dr. No.
That's what I was thinking.
But in the scene, you can actually see there's a sheet of glass laying on like Sean Connery or the tarantula is actually.
Is that right?
You kind of tell that he's not even touching it, which is kind of funny if you know anything about tarantulas, because they're really not. There's never been a documented death as a result of a tarantula bite.
So maybe he was just squeamish about them.
Squeamish about it, or maybe they didn't know. Maybe the filmmakers didn't.
Yeah.
So no, it's always been kind of a really funny scene.
Well, what makes a tarantula a good pet?
Well, they have a lot of the qualities that, it depends on what you're looking for in a pet. I mean, if you want something that's responsive, that's going to come when you call it, learn its name, do tricks, then tarantula's probably not a very good pet.
Of course, that applies to a cat. What you've just said.
but they are an interesting animal if you can just enjoy them for the way they look and for some of their interesting behaviors, and they're also incredibly easy to keep.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. What do you have to do?
Very little, actually. They're one of the easiest pets to keep. I mentioned before I had some reptiles too, but reptiles are much harder than tarantulas, and reptiles are relatively easy compared to most mammals and birds and things. I mean, tarantulas, that's how people accumulate big collections, because they are so individually so easy to keep. For most of the popular tarantulas anyway, the main things they need a water source, and they need a cage where they're not going to hurt themselves. There needs to be some of the large tarantulas that live in holes in the ground. If you give them a tall cage, they'll climb up the sides and then fall and hurt. And they can rupture an abdomen and bleed to death. So you don't want to have anything too tall for them. And they just need. You always have to have water, and then you feed them. They don't have to be fed often. My collection is lucky if it gets fed twice a month, and they're very, the temperature. Metabolism is determined by temperature. So at room temperature, they don't really eat all that often. And they stay nice and plump on relatively low amount of food.
Now I noticed on the website, the American Tarantula Society website, that I know nothing about spiders, and it was very interesting that the article there said that male tarantulas do not make good pets. Is that in general or just?
Well, they are adult male tarantulas do have a shorter lifespan, and one of the appealing things about tarantulas in general is that they are rather long-lived, especially considering when you compare them to insects that live. Many of them live out their lifespan in a matter of days or weeks, and even other spiders that might live 1 to 3 years. A female tarantula can live upwards of 30 years, depending on the species.
Wow, that's impressive.
Long time. Males don't live nearly as long. After they reach maturity, most males die, depending on species, within 2 months or 3 years. Some can go on for as long as 3 years, but usually somewhere. I'd say a year to year and a half is about average. Now,
do some of the tarantula species have different temperaments, giving them better pet potential?
Yes, there is a wide variety. There's everything from some of the North American tarantulas that barely move and are very, very calm, and versus some of the Asian and African species that are very fast-moving and very quick to bite. There's roughly 800 species that are named right now. The taxonomy of some of them is sort of messed up, so that the number tends to go up and down a lot, but it's roughly around 800.
So what tarantulas would you recommend for somebody, what species who's starting out, maybe in terms of availability or temperament or, just anything that would factor in?
It's very lucky that one of the best pet species is also the most common species that's available, which would be the Chilean rose tarantula, or sometimes called the Chilean rose hair tarantula. But it's sold in most pet stores. It's not always, the color can range from just kind of a dull brown to a very nice rich pink or red, but it's one of the most common. It's extremely hardy, very easy to care for, And they're often very docile, just like with any animal, though. The temperament can vary from individual to individual, so you want to be real careful. But generally they are pretty calm and slow-moving and very long-lived. My first tarantula was a Tulan rose hair. And then I got her, I believe, in 1992, and she is still alive and well.
Oh, that's great. My wife wanted me to ask you if you name your tarantulas.
I do not. A lot of hobbyists do.
Yeah.
A lot. It's just sort of a personal choice, I guess. The tarantula's never going to learn its name, so some people find it easier to remember. Which is which if they have names. I never have personally though.
Wow. So, and you have other arthropods too.
Yeah.
And what types would these be? When we say arthropods, it's not just spiders, but I mean, crabs are arthropods too, aren't they?
Crabs are also arthropods.
Scorpions?
Anything with a jointed exoskeleton.
Okay.
So it's going to be the arachnids, which includes spiders and scorpions, and a few other groups not as well known. Insects are the major group of arthropods. There's more of those than all the others combined. Crustaceans, it includes crabs and lobsters. Millipedes and centipedes are arthropods.
And so do you have all of these?
I have some representatives of all of those, yeah.
Wow. What is maybe the most recent that you've gotten?
I recently gotten a few mantids, which are, almost let's call them praying mantids, but mantids is just sort of the group name.
Like a walking stick?
No. Well, mantids are predatory. Walking sticks eat plants.
Oh, okay. For some reason, I thought a walking stick was a kind of a mantid.
No.
Okay.
There was one time when they were all grouped together. Mantids, grasshoppers, and cockroaches were all in the same group together, but they've since been broken into their own groups. But mantids are predatory. They eat insects and things. And I've got a few of those right now. They're not long-lived the way tarantulas are, so I doubt that my collection will ever be as big of mantids as the tarantulas, because the tarantulas just stick around. But the mantids typically live less than a year total. They grow very fast. They get to adult size, they reproduce, and then sometime after that they die.
Now, have you ever heard of I think they call it a fishing spider?
Fishing spider? Yeah.
Yeah, because for some reason this year in our woods, I live in, my wife and I live in West Michigan. I had never seen these spiders before, but we were looking up to a tree where there was a screech owl, and screech owl had a hole that the baby was poking its head out of. And a couple days later I looked, and right next to the hole was to me, what was a very large spider. I think it was probably, the feet would span about 3 inches.
Right.
And it turned out to be a fishing spider, or at least that's sort of the regional name. Can you tell me anything more about that creature?
Fishing spiders, there's several. There's 4 or 5 different species. The genus is called Dolomedes, and there's a bunch of different ones. The one you saw, was it kind of a bark-colored?
It was, and there were stripes on the legs.
Right. It was probably Tenebrosus, or there's another one that's very similar. And they're camouflaged like bark, and typically most of the fishing spiders usually find close to water, but some of them you find in other places also. But they're known for, especially certain species more than others, but they get their name because they will sit at the water's edge with 4 of their 8 legs on the surface of the water, and they wait for a fish or a tadpole or an insect or something to break the surface tension, and they run out across the water and grab them.
Okay, we do live on the river, so that probably explains why it was there. But it interested me that I had never seen one before. I've lived here since 1989, and I'm wondering if maybe for some reason, something about the climate, or just the kind of real dry summer we had, favored them for some reason.
It could be something like that. Sometimes they're very kind of cryptic looking and very camouflaged and very nocturnal, and so you don't see them. They're probably all around. You just don't see them that often. Now, it does seem like some years there's more than others, and I'm not sure what the deciding factor of that is. But I've noticed that here too. Like some years it seems like you can find them all over the riverbanks, and then other times I have a hard time finding any.
We'll be right back with more of What Were You Thinking?, the show about exotic pets, right after this exotic message.
What Were You Thinking will be right back after Bob gets the ducks out of his living room. Don't go away.
There's nothing like a shaggy dog, baby. They're shagadelic. And this is the place to find out how to have harmony in the household with your pets. Oh, yeah. So stop by our pad every week and get switched on, baby. Switched on to the show that's all about attitude. Oh, behave. With your groovy host, pet edutainer Arden Moore. Yeah, baby, yeah. Every week on demand on PetLifeRadio.com.
Let's Talk Pets on PetLifeRadio.com. Okay, ducks are in the pond, rabbits in his hutch, and monkeys... Oh, in my car! Oh, okay, well, I go check my insurance policy. We'll turn you back over to Bob.
Welcome back to What Were You Thinking? Our guest is Wade Harrell, president of the American Tarantula Society, and right now we're talking about some native spiders. Well, actually some spiders that I've seen outdoors around our house.
Now, one really gorgeous spider that we seem to get in hot, dry years, and I saw a couple of them this year, and again, I just know the sort of generic name, golden orb weaver. I think it's an Argiope?
Argiope?
Yeah. Okay, say that again.
Argiope.
Okay, good. Thanks for that. Yeah, a yellow spider with
Yellow.
Black and yellow, gorgeous thing.
Yeah, that's probably the. Yeah, it's got a lot of common names. They call them the black and sometimes called the black and yellow orb weaver, black and yellow garden spider. Sometimes they're called the writing spider because they have that distinct zigzag pattern in the web.
Right. What is the function of the zigzag on the web?
Well, there's a lot of debate about it. It's called a stabilumentum, and some scientists have suggested that maybe it's to tighten the web, just like something to make the web more, like flatten it out, to tighten it up. Some scientists have suggested that it's a visual clue for birds not to fly into the web, so the birds don't wreck the web.
I thought I read somewhere that the male, which is so much smaller, that was his portion of the web. Maybe that was his rec room or something.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if the male especially stays in that area.
Okay.
There could be something to that, but he doesn't make it. The female makes it.
Yeah.
But it's also one of the most interesting ideas about it, though, is that the web reflects a lot of ultraviolet.
Mm-hmm.
And insects can see ultraviolet, and it's thought that to an insect, sunlight reflecting off the web, it might make it look like a giant flower. And the flying insects will fly to the middle and, of course, get trapped and eaten.
Well, getting back to your tarantulas, okay. This is sort of an odd question, but what do you do with them? Do you just observe them, or do you interact with them in any way?
Well, I mostly I keep them and observe them. And when you get a big collection, sometimes you spend most of your time just taking care of them.
Yeah.
But I also do educational programs with them. I'll take some of them to schools. I just came back from a really big event in Raleigh, North Carolina, at the Natural History. It's called the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. And they have a big event called Bug Fest, and it's a big public family event. And I set up an exhibit for those featuring tarantulas and other spiders, and then they also do a table for them for scorpions and other arachnids. And so I, at that event, I probably had about 15 tarantulas plus another 20 or so spiders, and then I had half a dozen scorpion species and a few other arachnids. So that's a pretty good display.
Well, if I kept a pet tarantula, what kind of interesting behavior might I notice by watching the spider?
Well, it depends on what species. The Chilean rose I mentioned earlier, they are kind of famous for not doing a whole lot. But,
that sounds like me.
Yeah, they kind of sit around and wait to be fed. And then there's other species that will dig holes and burrows and really try to alter the environment, and that varies from species to species. Some can be perfectly content to sit in a cage and take whatever you give it, while others want to move dirt. If your tarantula starts just pushing all the dirt to one side of the cage, then it's obviously trying to tell you it wants to dig a hole. And if you give it a deep enough substrate, it'll dig a hole and make a little home for itself. some of the arboreal tarantulas, the ones that live in trees, they do some interesting behaviors. They will build a silken tube for themselves in one corner of the cage, usually incorporating some of the cage, whatever kind of cage decorations might be in there. They might do it just in a corner or beneath a piece of wood or something, and they make a little tube for themselves, just like they would in a tree.
Wow.
They lived up in a tree, or if they were in the wild. And the arboreals tend to be a little more active. They have really broad feet, and they're really good climbers. And they you'll see them a lot of times, stuck on the side of the glass, just walking around and hanging out on the glass of your cage.
Wow. Well, that's very cool. Well, thanks so much for talking to me. My guest has been Wade Harrell. He's the president of the American Tarantula Society. And you can find out more about tarantulas and the American Tarantula Society by visiting atshq.org. So thanks so much, Wade.
All right. Thanks, Bob.
Well, speaking of spiders, Wade was telling me a little bit about the fishing spider, and my wife Linda's here, and she's going to talk a little bit about her experience with this rather large and, I should say, frightening spider.
Oh, yeah. Well, one day I was in the backyard, and we have a release cage in the backyard for birds that we put baby birds in before we release them out into the woods. And I was out there one day during was it late spring or early summer, feeding them. And straight ahead of me, on the outside of this big release cage that's shaped kind of like a telephone booth, only bigger, I saw this enormous spider. It wasn't on my side of the fence, it was on the other side, but it was straight across from my field of vision. And it was stretched out, oh my gosh, it was about 4 inches, just humongous big spider. And it was eating something, and I was just totally freaked out by seeing it. And I backed my way out of that cage, pen, whatever you want to call it, and I went up and got Bob. By the time I got him, it was gone.
Of course, I figured that, she hadn't really seen that big of a spider, because I'd never seen anything that big, so...
Thought I was exaggerating,
whatever.
whatever.
I have to admit, I didn't really believe her.
Right, and so I thought, well, that's the last time I'll ever see that thing.
You hoped.
I hoped I'd never see that thing again. Well, next episode with it was Bob had seen a screech owl in a tree, a baby screech owl in a big hole in a tree back off of in our woods along the path. And he had me come back there one evening, and we were looking for it. It was the second or third night we'd seen it, and he said he looked up at the hole, didn't see it, and he said, yeah, I don't know if you want to look up there or not. I got my binoculars out, and I did look up there, and lo and behold, there is that great big spider right beside the hole. It was almost as big as the hole.
Yeah, no screech owl, but a spider, and I think he could have straddled the hole. And this was a hole large enough that the baby screech owl stuck its head out. In fact, the mother probably lived in there too, and they both came and went out of that hole.
Yes. So it was like a good 6-7 inches, and he was a good 4 or over inches. And beside it, he was almost the total height of that hole. That's how big he was.
Yeah, he was...
terribly frightening. Believe me, I was just scared out of my wits to look at. I had just kind of horrific feelings for a long time afterwards.
Now, you never imagined that there could be 2 of those monsters in one summer. You thought that probably the spider you had seen...
was the same one.
Yeah, by the release cage was the same one, and it had moved, a couple hundred feet, 300 feet maybe away, and climbed up this tree and decided to reside next to the screech owls.
That maybe it went in with whatever. Maybe it was bothering them, whatever.
But you had another experience with the release cage.
Well, and so that was the second episode. The third episode was one day we used to cover the release cage at night with sheets so that they could have a little more secluded sleeping time.
What kind of birds did we have in the release cage at that time?
I can't remember exactly what kind it was. Do you remember?
It was either the robins or a couple woodpeckers. A couple.
We had some cedar waxwings at one point too. I don't believe it was them, but I believe it was that group of 5 robins and some other kind of little bird.
Okay.
Anyway, there was a few birds in there, and this was past the point when we were using that outdoor release cage, and I was folding the sheets up, getting ready to take them back upstairs. We were done with them for a while, and I was carrying things back upstairs, and I was putting some sheets in the hall closet. I walked up the stairs, and I just kind of felt something on my shoulder, and I reached up and I kind of flicked whatever it was off my shoulder, and would you believe it was that spider? I went like this, flicked it, and it went flying across into the hall closet and landed on top of this pile of sheets. In all its enormity, I was absolutely scared out of my wits, just like I was before. I was practically speechless. And I said, Bob, come here. It's that spider again.
Yeah, that thing looked scary enough from a distance through the binoculars, but there it was right in our house.
Right in our house.
So I got a jar and just scooped it up in the jar, and I remember Linda saying, "Don't put it in our yard, put it in the neighbor's woods."
Yeah, up in the front part where nobody would be, in that front part of the next door there. I thought that would be the best place for it. We didn't want to kill it or anything. I just didn't want to run into it again.
So I walked quite a distance, and I got rid of the spider, and we figured that was about it. And also, I think at that time, did you call Blandford Nature Center in Grand Rapids?
Yes, at this point, we did not know the name of that spider. We had no idea what this thing was. And I called Blandford Nature Center, and she thought she knew what it was because she was interested in spiders, but she looked it up. She said, "I think what you've got there is a fishing spider." And she read the description of it, and I said, "That is what it is. That is what it is."
And
so we knew what it was after that.
So once again, we figured that was all. But we had one more experience, and that was when we have people helping us with work around our house and around our yard that Linda can't do because of her bad back, and I won't do because of terminal laziness.
No, you're not.
One of those things was we wanted another path in our woods. See, we have lots of high weeds and nettles, and so we had this real energetic young man named Corey. And in no time at all, he had, using a grass whip, he had cut a path all the way back to the river for us, and then all the way along the river.
And on a diagonal angle, going back up to the middle path.
So we thought it'd be nice to have one more path that connected to the neighbor's driveway so we could kind of walk in a circle. So we showed him where we wanted the path, and one afternoon he came and he cut the path.
Yes. And he, in his usual manner, he had it done in no time flat, like half an hour, this great big huge long path that was like half a football field long. He's just an amazing kid. He came back up to the house and he said, "Boy, you got some big spiders in that woods." And I said, "What?" I knew what he was talking about immediately. I said, "What? Spiders? You mean it wasn't just one?" He said, "Oh, no, I saw 3 of them." I said, "Oh, no, they're breeding in the woods." So then that made me even more afraid of like being in the woods for fear I might see one. Although we have not seen one since that time, but they're in there somewhere.
No, I've been looking and we haven't seen them.
We haven't seen one. I've been looking for them actually, and I can't see them.
We did see 2 of the spiders that I also talked to Wade about that are called golden orb weavers. And we did get 2 more of those this year out in the front garden.
Yes, one in the hostas and one out in my front flower bed where the mums and all different kind of perennials are. Quite far apart, those 2 beds are, but
Yep.
They each sported one of these, what I call garden spiders.
Right, and we don't really have time to tell the story now, but I'd recommend anyone who wants a good story about a spider to read my book, Foul Weather, and there's a chapter called Golden Orb Weaver. And now you're pretty scared of those spiders, right?
Oh, since I was a little girl, when I tried to pick up one by the leg, when I thought it was dead and it suddenly came alive and tried to crawl on me, I just am absolutely horrified of those spiders.
And you are not a person who's really you're not afraid of mice.
Things in general, or even other spiders in general.
Nope, you're fine with most spiders.
There's something about the looks of that spider that just is an instinctive fear.
And yet, Linda ended up actually catching food, and feeding this
throwing it into the web.
Yep, feeding this golden orb weaver that was...
I didn't think it'd be able to eat because it didn't have any cover so that bugs would see it and go in there. And
so it's a good story, and that's one of the chapters of my book, Foul Weather, and it's how Linda overcame her fears of the golden orb weaver to be kind of a
little friend.
A little friend for it. So
I didn't overcome my fears, by the way. I'm still afraid of them.
Okay, but you managed to do it. And
I wanted to help her anyways.
That was amazing. So, well, that is about it then for this week's episode of What Were You Thinking? And I want to thank Wade Harrell for joining us and
Thank you, Wade.
telling us about spiders, about tarantulas in particular. And I want to remind people that you can be the next guest on What Were You Thinking? And we would like you to come on, in fact, and talk about whatever exotic...
All your pets.
Yeah, whatever exotic pet you have, anything except a dog and cat, because we love dogs and cats, but they're not considered exotic. Those are for other shows. So,
think of your best stories you've got about your pet.
Yeah, if you have a good story about a fish, a rabbit, a squirrel, a skunk, any
Anything
legal
unusual.
pet, anything legal, just let us know, and
We'd love to hear from you.
you might be our next guest. So send me an email at bob@petliferadio.com. And in the meantime, please check out my website, and it's bobtart.com, BOBTARTE.com. And you'll see lots of pictures of our animals and some of the birds that we have raised for the Wildlife Rehab Center. And we're going to do a story on the Wildlife Rehab Center in the next show. It's an interview with Peg Markle. And that's about it.
Yep. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, and thanks to our producers.
Bye-bye.
Thinking about buying a monkey? How about a ferret or a skunk? Then check out the show that will answer the burning questions. Where do you get them? What do you feed them? How do you take care of them? And most of all, what were you thinking? With exotic pet expert and author Bob Tart, every week on demand from PetLifeRadio.com.